All right, today we're going to be installing a mirror repair kit for the mirror retractor on our Lexus LX570. The power mirrors are also available on the Toyota LandCruiser. This applies for the 2008 through 2016 mirrors on the, again, LX570 from Lexus and the Toyota LandCruiser. So what happens is the mirror retractor, the power mirrors, the retracting mechanism inside there stops functioning, whether it's because of stripped gears or broken components. And there is a retractor repair kit you can buy. It's OEM from Toyota. You cannot get the kit in the US from what I've seen. It is sold on eBay. I'll put a link directly to the listing for the seller that sells them. On eBay in the description below, so make sure to click on that if you want to purchase your own. It comes with the cover here that goes underneath the mirror because these little snaps will break on you. These guys here, every time you're trying to take that out. It comes with a triangle mirror cover with the sound insulation. Not sure if we're going to need that. We'll find out whenever we are taking everything apart. Some new wiring because the wiring does break eventually, in case that's the problem with yours. It comes with a new wiring harness. The bracket for the retractor comes with the kit as well. So again, some of these parts do break and wear out. And then we also have a connector, zip tie, and the black adhesive there. So we'll get started pulling our mirror off, take it apart one step at a time, and replace the components that need replacing and show you what all of that looks like. On the back side of the door panel, so these two cables here are for the door handle to unlock the door, and then you've got the other cable right there, those two connectors that are for the light and the seat adjustment settings, your number 1, 2, and 3 buttons. So we're gonna take those connectors off. We're going to undo these two cables, and then we should be able to release the door panel. Now that you've got your door panel off, you've got a connector here for the mirror. We want to pull that off as well. Again, use your pick, push that connector in, the tab for the connector, and pull it out. You've got one little clip here that also holds it in to the door. You can undo that. You can pull that out as well. So you've got the clip out from the door. Your wiring is loose. Then you've got these 3 little nuts that hold the actual mirror on. We're going to use a deep socket, 10mm, to get those out. And once these nuts are off, you should be able to pull the mirror off from the door. Alright, now that those are off, we can just maneuver the mirror a little bit, and it comes right out. Now we've got our mirror assembly ready to take in the garage, and we should be able to work on it and get the parts that are not working inside it replaced and get it working correctly again. So we've got our mirror here. Next thing we need to do is pop this back cover off. Alright. So what we need to do is get the glass off the mirror housing, and if you push it to the bottom, you'll notice there's not much room at the top. Push it upwards, there's a little bit of a gap there, and what you want to do is look inside there, and you'll see that there's a white plastic housing that the mirror is attached to. Towards the bottom, there should be a little indentation in there, and if you get a thin Phillips or a flathead, put it in there, put a little bit of pressure between the indentation and the mirror, should pop right off. And now that your glass is loose, if you have the heated mirrors, you'll notice a couple of connectors on the back. You'll need to remove those. And then you'll have one connector here if you have the auto dimming mirrors as well. So that connector and these two need to come off. So we'll pop those off. And then grab your pick and you'll want to take this connector off. There's your mirror. Go ahead and set it aside. You're not going to need it until final reassembly. And if you notice on the inside, there are 4 Phillips head screws. You'll want to remove those. The next thing you need to do is undo a couple clips. You've got one clip here, one here, one here, one here. What you want to do is put a screwdriver in there, or a toothpick or something, or a pick. I'm going to use a combination of a few screwdrivers and a pick, and just pry the clip loose and put something in between it. And then once you do, you want to pry the back cover off. I've got it already off here, but the back cover is this section here. It will come off. We want to take that off. It's got 3 Phillips head screws here, here, and here. I've already taken them off, but you just reach your Phillips screwdriver in there, pull each one of those out. The actual piece won't come out because there's still a wire connected in there, but at this point I like to take this out just so that it's loose and out of the way in case we need to maneuver it. A few different screws holding the large bracket here to the actual plastic housing. It's hard to see here, but there's 1, 2, 3 Torx screws there with the star-shaped Torx heads. We'll want to take those off, and then once those are off, we can start working on the actual housing here. Next, we've got the aluminum cast bracket that sits inside here. It's held on by a few Phillips screws. We'll want to take those off. Now there's 2 plastic molded pieces left on the mirror. One is this housing, and one is the housing down here at the bottom. So they're loose at this point. You can see they're separated from each other, but there's a couple clips that hold them on, and we want to pry those apart. So use your plastic tool so that you don't scratch anything. And we want to work on separating those. Start on one end and work towards the other end. Make sure you don't use a metal screwdriver. Use a plastic pry tool. That way you're not leaving any indentations or any sort of marks on anything. There's one more screw right here, Phillips screw. Let's get that guy off. It's right there, if you can see it. All right, we've got that off. Now let's pry the 2 sections remaining of the mirror apart from each other. We'll start here on this end. You should be able to pry it up a little bit and then hold it with your hand while you pry the other side apart. And you should be able to get this piece of the housing off.
Okay, as you can see, we've got this front section of the housing off. We'll put this aside along with our other parts. Now, what we've got left are our mirror motor that controls the position, our aluminum bracket, the retractor motor inside here, the plastic housing at the bottom, light bulb for the light that shines down on our door sill when we open the door, and a few other components here, and we're going to continue with the repair. So now we've got our two sections here side by side. This is the old unit, this is the new one. You can see that the new unit has the gear housing here, the wires go through here, has the clips and everything. You reuse this guy here. You do not reuse the motor and the gear housing, that's all brand new in here. The wiring harness, a new one is included, as you can see here in the kit. We do have to reroute this wiring harness through the entire thing and repin it onto the connector. New connector does come with this. You've got the old one here to use as reference so you know which color wire goes. So we pulled this watertight plug off. Now the next thing we're going to do is pull all these wires out of this connector harness here, the piece that holds all of them. I'm going to use a pick just to pick these wires out one by one so I'm not damaging anything. So now that we've got all that disconnected, we've got our mirror controller disconnected, all of this is on the new housing. So what I'm going to do is cut this, because none of this really matters anymore. So we're going to cut this entire harness because I don't want to bother pulling all this through. Use some wire cutters, cut that, and we'll be able to pull this away, pull this harness through. There we go, and pull it through here. There we go. All right, that's all out. So we don't need this, we don't need this housing, and we don't need this motor housing. We're going to get rid of all of this. So all we've got left now is the bracket that bolts onto the car and the bottom housing for the mirror with our light on it. And the mirror housing itself has this insulated section on the inside that comes with the new kit, and whether you want to replace it or not is up to you, but the new piece has a fresh piece of insulation and should help cut wind noise down a little bit since the old piece is probably pretty old. So we're going to take this, toss it out, and we're going to use the new piece. What we want to do is route the wires through here, then through this part of the housing. Make sure you take your time. You don't want to bend any of the connectors. And then you want to route them through this part right here. So what I'm going to do to make it easier to get these connectors through that small hole, wrap a piece of painter's tape around the connectors. And that way they stay together and they're much easier to maneuver through that small space. There we go. Just like that. And we've got them through and ready to go. Okay, here we are with a few more steps done. Went ahead and plugged the new connector into the back of the mirror control motor. Make sure everything clips in, and then push around the weather boot to make sure it's in there firmly. Tuck your wires underneath this clip, and then underneath the second clip
down there at the bottom. And you're going to have one connector that you'll need to cut off of your old harness and splice onto this one. It's going to be the motor harness for the retractor. You can see the electric tape there. So I just cut that off, just a little pigtail end from the old connector, spliced it into the two wires that came off of this new harness and plugged it into the motor there. And now we've got a couple steps left. The wires are routed through all the proper holes in the different housings. So the next thing we want to do is use the 3 screws. If you remember, there were 3 black screws to mount this back onto the housing, the new housing. You'll see this slot right here for the wire to run through. So line that up with that slot there, and that should put it in about the right position, and then you'll use your 3 Phillips screws here to mount that back on. We're going to go ahead and do that. Our control motor down tightly. We've got the remaining wires on the pigtail here for the mirror heater and the mirror dimmer. We're going to plug those into the glass at the very last step before we clip the mirror back on. This is loose here. We haven't bolted it to the bracket yet because first we need to get this next piece of the mirror housing on. So I've got this housing in place. I went ahead and put this Phillips screw and this one here in place. Didn't tighten them, they're still loose, just to hold things in place. Next, I'm gonna line up the bottom piece, the bottom plastic housing, get it lined up and clipped in, and we'll put in the screw that goes right here, and then this very bottom one. And those 2 screws are going to go through both plastic housings and the metal bracket, hold everything in place, and then finally we'll come back, put this screw in, and then go back and tighten all of them. So now that these 2 plastic pieces of the housing are screwed in and firmly attached to the metal bracket, next thing we're going to do is get our rear portion of the mirror housing clip back on. Now be careful with the clips and their locations. Make sure you've got everything located so you know where to apply pressure, where not to, and make sure you don't break anything. There's going to be 2 primary clips here and here, 2 that go here and here, 1 that attaches behind here, and then a few others along the front edge. Okay, we've got that clip back on. Now we want to put our mirror glass back in and attach this housing back to here with the 3 hex head screws. Before I put my glass back in, just because it's a fragile piece, I'm going to go ahead and attach this to the bracket, and then once we're ready, we'll put the mirror and the glass on. Okay, we've got the main part of the mirror screwed onto the bracket. Again, use the 3 hex head screws. There's 1 there, there's 1 right there, and the last one you can see right there. Make sure those are tight. And one other thing, unrelated to replacing your housing and your motor and everything, if you ever have a mirror on a LandCruiser or an LX570 that's just a little bit wobbly, seems to wiggle around when you hit bumps or if there's wind, usually the culprit are these 3 screws right here. So pop this cover off and you should be able to get to them, tighten them up, and you'll generally be good to go, and it'll stop the wobbling mirror. So next thing we're going to do, I'm going to pull the rest of this wiring harness through, get it to where it's a little bit tighter right here, leave a little bit of slack, and then we're going to put this bottom cover on. Your kit should have come with a new one. If your old one came off with all of the clips intact, you can use it and keep one as a spare. I've almost always broken at least one of these clips when taking them off. So my old one is trashed. We're going to use the new one here. I almost forgot. We've got to put our connector on to the wires that come out of the harness. So we've got a new connector that came with the kit, the plastic housing. Everything's already got pins terminated on the end. We have our old one here. We're going to use it to see where all the pins go. And one by one, we're going to put all of those in there. Now, I think what I'm going to do is start at one end and then work my way towards the other side. You've got a bunch of them that are in the middle here, and the last few are empty on that side. I'm going to start here with the side of the connector that has the pink wires and go from there towards the other end. Now we've got a few of them put in here. As you're putting these wires in, you'll notice this little raised bar right here. Make sure as you're holding your connector, grabbing it, moving it around to get your wires, push it in, do not push this bar in. That locks everything in place. If you do on accident, there's two little tabs right here and right here that you can use to pry it back up. You'll need to use a little pick or something like that to get underneath there and pry it up. I just did that a minute ago as I was holding on to this, trying to get it positioned correctly to put one of the wires in. So don't push that clip in. If you do, stop, pull it back out just a little bit so that nothing's locked in place, and then continue with your wires. Also, you'll notice that the clips are directional. There's a little raised edge right there. If you can see it towards the bottom of the video here, you'll see the little pin that's coming upwards. That little pin is going to go upwards towards the top of the connector, the top where the release lever is. So those pins, make sure they're facing that way, and insert your wires, and you should be good. So we're going to continue getting the rest of these in and then move on to the next step. Okay, we've got all the wires pinned and connected. I'm going to go back and just push on each one, make sure they're clipped in correctly, and as long as everything's good to go, next thing I'm going to do is use this piece of thicker tape that's included in the kit. Push all these wires down, get them to sit flush, and wrap that around there just to hold everything in place. All right, that's on there. Now with these types of adhesives that go on the ends of the wires, this one in particular, it sticks to itself. So don't wrap it around and stick it to the smooth backing. You actually want to take the two adhesive pieces on the ends of this and stick the adhesive portions together like that. I'm going to wrap one more piece of electric tape right here just so that everything stays in place, and call it good. All right, there we are. Good to go, good as new. And only thing left is our mirror glass. Let's go ahead and get that back on. If you remember, on the back of the glass, you had the two little, the one connector that went to this guy, the black connector, which is right there. And you've got the two push connectors that go to these two pins. And those are the ones right there. Let's get those on real quick.